Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness, and Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is Donovan. And today I have a special guest, Joe Booth, my dear friend. He is the founder and executive director of Class 5 Mind, a substance abuse recovery platform that blends technology with mindfulness and holistic wellness. We're a big fan of that. He's also the author of From the River, a guidebook to sobriety from a lifetime of lessons paddling. So please welcome Joe. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. I really appreciate you guys having me on. I've watched several of your episodes, been following you guys on all the channels, of course, and I'm really happy to be here today. And for everybody watching, hello from your device.
Yes. So why don't you start by telling us a little about your story and how it led you to creating Class 5 Mind?
Yeah, I have a pretty blended background. I'm an avid outdoorsman. I've been whitewater kayaking since I was a little kid, probably way too early. I scared myself a lot when I was like 3 years old. My dad used to take us down the river with him and my family on the family rafts. And I was the youngest of two siblings. So I had an older brother that I was always trying to keep up with. And I always loved the river. I loved being able to just jump in the water and swim and feel the current and play on the rocks and skip stones and see all the wildlife. Always been drawn and connected to the outdoors. You know, we are made of water, and the water that's flowing through the river and evaporating into the air and forming clouds and raining on the ocean and like going to aquifers and going back into us. It's this nonstop cycle. And I've always found that very fascinating and connected with this idea that we are water and that we flow through so many things like water. And as I became more of an adult and grew and started teaching people how to whitewater kayak and became an instructor and taking swift water rescue certifications where you're out there helping people that are in trouble, knowing what to do in emergency situations, I realized that whitewater is one of those sports that either terrifies people and they never want to touch it, or piques their curiosity and they want to get into it. And for a percentage of the people, when they get into whitewater kayaking, it is just addicting because it is so much fun. You learn some of the fundamentals like how to brace, how to roll back up if you flip over. You learn how to read the water, the way that the current flows, all of these things. And this real connection to the river. And that's the connection that I always had when I was a little kid to the water. And I've just come to appreciate it more and more as an adult. And the reason that we named the company Class 5 Mind is because just taking a step back now into my personal recovery from substance abuse is as a teenager, I started smoking way too much weed, started drinking, just the normal adolescent stuff, right? And then in college, way too much drinking, way too much smoking. And you think at a certain point, this stuff just goes away. I always thought it was just going to go away. Hey, I'm going to be an adult one day. I'm going to have a full-time job and all of this stuff is just going to stop. And unfortunately, for a large percentage of the population, about 1 in 8 adults, it doesn't just stop. Addiction is a very real thing. Substance abuse kills more people every year than the coronavirus kills every year. Nobody's talking about how to control addiction and substance abuse and the mental health picture, but we have to wear masks everywhere we go, right? So I really identified with the group of people that were out there like pushing the limits all the time, because when I was being studious at school, I'm trying to get straight A's, do the best that I can there. When I'm out in the wilderness, I'm trying to push myself as hard as I can in my kayak, run waterfalls, run the nastiest rapids on the river, like a very competitive mindset. And then when I transitioned into work, I got into the software industry. I was like, man, I want to excel at this. I want to climb the corporate ladder. I want to make as much money as I can. I want to run large teams. I want to make an impact in this company. And all of these things followed a very linear path, which is going big all the time, pushing yourself, competitive mindset. And that can burn people out really hard. And what I realized is it was that same momentum that I had established as a little kid. I never really grew out of it. And that's really hard for some people to learn, because what I realize is that the coping mechanisms that I developed as a teenager and then basically solidified them when I was in college, dealing with massive anxiety from trying to get straight A's all the time and working a part-time job. It was really hard. And I never grew out of those patterns of drinking and smoking. And eventually that caught up to me. My wife approached me and put it in very clear terms that I wasn't really being a great husband, and that she was probably going to be walking out the door if I didn't turn it around. And it was at that point, that was a very deep inflection point for me in my life, to realize that I wasn't becoming the person that I wanted to be. I wasn't proud of the man that I was. I wasn't proud of the husband that I was. And I needed to make dramatic changes very quickly. And that's when I started my journey on substance abuse recovery. And I modeled my recovery after the principles I learned on the river. And we call the company Class 5 Mind because there's a rating system in whitewater, and that's a 0 through a 6. A 0 would be like nothing, just flat water like a lake. A 1 is just flat, moving water, very mild current. So it's like a beginner, right? You get in the kayak and you're paddling around. There's very low risk. Class 6 is like Niagara Falls. It's impossible to run, certain death. So the two sides of the spectrums are beginners in Class 1 and then experts in Class 5, where there is massive risk to life and limb, where you need ideal conditions. You have to be peak performance. You have to have a team of people that you're doing these things with. And what I realized was that in order to overcome substance abuse, you have to have this Class 5 mindset. You have to be super diligent. You have to have the right people around you. You have to make sure that you are not getting complacent, because you will flip your boat and you will end up swimming down some really nasty stuff and get hurt. And you know that in the analogy there with the river, that could be a relapse. For some people, relapse isn't really an option. So we came up with the Class 5 Mind. We have 5 principles that go along with Class 5 Mind, and that's really what we've based the program around. And then, of course, I tied in a lot of stuff with my technology background and what I've learned in the software industry for 10 years, and making sure that we're taking a modern approach for people. And it's been an amazing journey. It's been an amazing journey.
Wow, that sounds like such an incredible journey. I'd be curious though, like based on what you were saying, and I'm just kind of noticing that instead of you calling it like substance abuse, or is that different in your mind than like alcoholism, or someone who would define themselves as an alcoholic? Like, or where's that line for you? Is that like a gradient too?
Well, it is a gradient. And I think that substance abuse is a symptom of a larger problem. And it's a mental health issue is really what it is. People are trying to cope with something. Yeah. And some drugs are extremely addictive at a chemical level. Like there's an opioid epidemic from people that I've never been addicted to anything in my life. And then one day I'm taking painkillers and I can't kick them. You know, there is certainly a substance issue there that is playing on the receptors in our brain that are driving that opioid craving. However, there's a lot of people that are just trying to deal with the anxiety or stress, or maybe they had a very traumatic event happen to them that they're trying to cope with. So I think it's all part of that mental illness spectrum, like trying to manage anxiety and depression, which is the trap that I fell into. But when you talk about like alcoholism or a drug addict or an addict or somebody that is, struggling with substance abuse, these are all terms that get thrown around interchangeably. The way that I define it is that alcoholic, that's substance abuse. Drug addict, that's substance abuse.
Right.
But I don't buy into the mindset that if you are an alcoholic or a drug addict, that you are stuck that way for the rest of your life. It just doesn't line up to the science that's been out there. They've done plenty of studies that show that substance abuse recovery is one of those things that if you get the right team and you're on the right treatment plan, and there's a lot of factors that play into any type of recovery, whether it's a mental health issue or whether it's somebody stubbing their toe and breaking their toe, you have to have a lot of things lined up. And when it comes to substance abuse recovery from alcoholism or drug addiction, recovery is possible for about 75% of the population. That's about the rate that they've seen of people that can recover and do recover and maintain long-term sobriety. So I don't buy into this mindset of saying, hey, I'm Joe, I'm an alcoholic, and I can never drink again. You know, oh, poor me, I have this disease, right? I have this genetic disorder. We know that epigenetics is very complex, that there are things that turn certain genes on and turn certain genes off. And that can be environmental. It could be something that's hereditary, but it has a lot to do with our environment and the things that we put in our body. And you know this, we've talked about this before, like the things that we put in affect our mood, right? So like if you're putting in healthy things in your body, whether that's food or healthy content, like reading a good book or watching something that's going to make you laugh instead of something that's going to make you scared and pull up triggering thoughts. There's so many factors that play along this. So I don't believe that once somebody is an alcoholic, that they are that way for the rest of their life. I think that it can be treated. I know that it can be treated. I work with people every single day in this category. I see people improve. I see people that want to say, hey, Joe, I don't want to drink or smoke ever again. I want to be completely sober. And I work with those people. That's where I'm at. I feel like the benefits for me to not drink and smoke far outweigh getting a buzz and, you know, with some buddies. It doesn't make it, for me, the benefits outweigh the negatives, which is why I don't drink or smoke anymore. I sleep way better. But some of my clients are just trying to manage. They're saying, hey, listen, I'm cool. I just want to smoke, you know, with my girlfriend every once in a while. I want to drink beers with my buddy on the weekends. And I don't want to feel like there's something wrong with me because I want to do that. I don't want to carry this stigma of being an alcoholic for the rest of my life. So those are people that make that decision too. So you build a framework of recovery around them, something to modify their environment, the things that they're putting in their body, the people that they're associating with. And there's so much there with the mindset to get people to think differently about the stigma of mental health and about the stigma of whether you are a recovered alcoholic, in recovery, sober, or you're just saying, hey, I don't ever want to drink again.
Yeah, that reminded me of a conversation that I had somewhat recently with a friend who basically communicated that he does not have the relationship that he would like with drinking. And maybe this will open up a new vein of conversation, but he was basically saying, like, I don't want to tell people I feel like I'm an alcoholic and I can't drink anymore because I don't want the rest of that stigma associated. Even if, you know, he said, even if I was able to come to a place where I felt okay with it, I still feel like there's this external judgment or pressure or, you know, this way that people will view me. And I'm looking for ways to kind of start on this journey without, you know, explicitly using that label. I'd be curious what kind of advice or what first steps you would have for someone who's in that sort of a position.
Well, first of all, I would tell your friend that it's awesome that he's even talking to somebody about this, because going it alone and isolating is a big issue, especially among men. And it's one of those things where we are told as boys to do things on your own, be self-sufficient, suck it up. We're given two options for our emotions: happiness and anger. And if you, and basically it's a green light to just do whatever it takes to be quote unquote happy. And anything that gets in my way, then I have the right to be angry for that. But there's a full spectrum of emotions that you can experience that most people don't, because they never learn how, and they're never told that it's okay to experience them. So your friend being vulnerable and opening up to you about where they feel they are in their relationship with alcohol, that's extremely common. I would let them know that what they are experiencing, millions of other people experience that on a daily basis. And it doesn't make them somebody that has an incurable disease. It doesn't mean that there's anything that's wrong with them. Actually, let me rephrase that. There might be something wrong with them, but it's not anything that can't potentially be fixed. So it's like, you know, it's like, yeah, dude, you got this thing that might be broken right now because you've fallen into a series of patterns that are negative, that are affecting your health. They might be affecting your work. They might be affecting your finances and your relationship. So you look at this whole picture. What's everything that it's affecting? Okay, it's 3 out of 5 are really in trouble right now. Well, if you cut out drinking, is it going to improve those things? It might. It very well might. But there's also stuff you got to do to get these other three things in order. I've met a lot of people that stopped drinking and their lives didn't get any better because they still had all these horrible habits of being a, kind of a loser adult, not paying their bills on time, not following through on the commitments that they make. So it's like, you can't blame alcohol or pot on that. These things aren't related. They're not. The problem is you probably feel guilty about being a man child that never learned how to be a responsible grown person. And you're trying to cope with that stress and those feelings of shame through the channels that you learned in adolescence and in college, that you never broke out of that because you're not hanging out with the right people. You're not reading the right content. And you're not listening to these healthy things that expose this stigma. But yeah, you're a friend that is feeling a stigma like that is extremely common, which is one of the reasons that I decided to open up about this. I could have been one of these guys, like a closet sober guy, right? Oh, don't tell anybody I don't drink. I'm ashamed of it. I'm so open and happy to be representing this population because more people need to hear that there's nothing wrong with you that cannot be fixed, that cannot be rewired. The brain is extremely plastic. Neuroplasticity is a real thing. We know how to stimulate neuroplasticity. We know what foods you should eat. We know what kind of sleep schedule you should have. We know what sort of exercise and meditation techniques and cognitive priming, breath work, all of this stuff works. But the problem is people don't know about it. We don't talk about it. It's certainly not something that's in corporate America at all. Drinking is part of the culture, especially in the software industry. I used to go to Oracle Open World when I was doing sales for Oracle, and this was like just a drink fest. And then I started getting into the Salesforce world. So I would go to Dreamforce every year. It's a freaking party, man. It is a freaking party. And I thought, everybody does it. Everybody does it. Everybody does it. But here's the reality. Not everybody does it. I was surrounding myself with people that I chose to support the reality that I wanted to build. And when I stepped out of that role, I realized that there are a lot of people that don't drink, that don't have a problem, that are completely comfortable not drinking and not being loud and 3 a.m, and love to wake up early and experience a sunrise and do yoga or go on a jog or meditate or wake up early and drive to the beach to surf, whatever it is. There are just as many of those people that are living happy, healthy, balanced lives than there are people that think that everybody drinks. So for your friend that's sort of trying to straddle those two worlds right now, I would say dip your toes in the other side of the water. Do some research around the things that support the growth mindset that says you can go beyond this, that you're not going to be an alcoholic for the rest of your life. And then that stigma that they might be fearing right now, they'll get over it real quick because they're going to realize that that is somebody else's problem. That's not their problem. They don't have to wear that scarlet letter. Let somebody else judge them. Who cares? Because once you get confident about where you are, and we work with a lot of people on emotional intelligence to develop this confidence, to develop this self-awareness, then you start realizing that all that other stuff that I was concerned about, other people thinking about me, again, those are just patterns that I developed through trying to fit in with the cool kids when I wasn't one of the cool kids, but I really wanted to be one.
A lot to digest. And I really resonate with what you were saying about, and really calling people out on, being a man child and just noticing that it's not necessarily the alcohol or the substances, like how they're living their life influences everything else. And as a stress doctor, I see this all the time where it's just that they don't have the tools to deal with the stress or negative emotions. So they don't know what else to do. So alcohol just numbs the uncomfortable feelings or the emotions that they don't know what to do with. And there's just like endless possibilities is what you were kind of getting at. Like there's so many different tools out there that they just have to discover and explore. And there's so many different perspectives that it's like their environment influences everything. And if you surround yourself with people that are healthy and happy, that's what you become to some extent. But if you surround yourself with people who just want to party all the time, that's what you end up doing. So I really appreciate everything you're sharing.
Yeah, well, thank you. It really is one of those things where if you want to move forward and progress in life, you have to find people that have done that already. And sometimes you have to look at your peer group and say, I love you. We had a lot of fun, but you're not right for me at this stage of my life. And I'll keep in touch. We'll be buddies, but I'm not going to be the guy that calls you on the weekend anymore. And one of the realizations, that I had is that, I was the ringleader. I was the guy that I was calling up people, peer pressuring them, like, come on, dude, come on. Your girlfriend's not going to care. Come to the bar with me. Let's do it. And I'm like getting people to support the lifestyle that I desperately needed. Validation was okay. And then those guys that are on the fence, they're there with me. And then you have all the laughs, all the dopamine's flowing, right? You feel good. You feel bonded, right? But in reality is, these are what we call like good time Charlies, right? They show up for the good times, but all of a sudden when Joe Booth wasn't drinking anymore, those guys aren't around. And then when I would want to go kayaking and I realized that, damn, these guys are like smoking way too much pot before we're doing like a really difficult run. And I might need them to save my life. Like that's real talk. Like when you're running class 5 whitewater, you're scouting rapids, you're setting up safety, you're putting your hands in the lives of your crew. And when I would see people, they would smoke a little weed when you're doing these intermediate runs. And that's, that's fine. You want to you do your thing, relax, whatever, this low consequence, right? But then you start running class 4 and it gets more serious. And then you're running class 5 and you're realizing that these people aren't just doing it to relax anymore. They're doing it because they need to. They need to. And I don't want somebody that's high trying to throw a rope bag with me when my life depends on it. I want somebody that's super focused and sharp and has all of their wits about them. So I started to like diverge from certain groups of people. And unfortunately, I lost touch with a lot of the people that I had experienced a lot of really good times with, and I wish them all luck. But the beauty is when I wrote my book and kind of talked a lot about substance abuse, especially among men in the outdoor adventure sports world, had a lot of people reach out to me saying, thank you so much for writing this book. I'm so glad people are talking about this. I had a lot of friends that I knew say that, hey, I don't know if you ever knew this, but I've been drinking way too much and, blah, blah, blah. And then I had other people reach out to me and say, I haven't drank in 10 years. I don't ever talk about it with any of my kayaking buddies. Thank you for letting people know that this is a thing. And then it's like, whoa, all of a sudden I had all this validation about being sober and helping people. Meanwhile, rewind 20 years, I was looking for validation for people to just drink with and smoke with. So it's amazing the way that life changes and you have to change with it. Because if you think that your old way of doing things are going to get you through those years when you're in your 30s and when you're in your 40s, those old habits are not going to work anymore. And I think it's to your point, Dr. Fong, people don't know these tools exist. They don't. They think, hey, this is what I do, right? Isn't this how I burn stress? Aren't I supposed to come home and have a few beers? Aren't I supposed to come home and open a bottle of wine and have 2 glasses before dinner and finish the bottle before night? Everybody does that, right? How's this any different? But the reality is not everybody does do that. And there are better ways to cope with stress and cope with whatever you're dealing with on the inside that are going to be so much more fulfilling and offer you so much more long-term benefit and create real bonds with people that aren't bonding over adrenaline and aren't bonding over drinks. You realize who your real friends are very quickly.
Yeah, that makes me think of a couple different, experiences that I've had. Whitewater rafting is not the thing that I've participated in. Be interesting. I might be open to it, but I have done a good amount of snowboarding, and I definitely have seen, that same type of culture where, hey, we're going up on the hill, like, let's have a couple hits, have a couple beers, whatever. And it really struck me when you were talking about balance, right? There's certain times where it's like, okay, like this is a small amount, this works for this person, whatever, cool, they can do that. And then there's other times where it's like, I'm sure you've experienced this, like you're supposed to go do some activity and one guy's puking for like the whole day and like can't do anything and the whole like trip is thrown sideways or whatever else. And at a certain point, it's just like, what is the whatever benefit, if there is any, that's coming out of this is completely outweighed by all the negative experiences that happen. And that's why I eventually like really looked at my relationship with substances and started changing those pieces. The question that I wanted to get to is, it seems like in addition to using it as a tool to get rid of stress, it seems like a lot of people use it as a tool for connection. So I'd be curious if you have any ideas on how like people can kind of move away from using that as a way to connect.
Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of people drink because they have social anxiety. I think that's a very common thing. We've all experienced that. I think I can think about plenty of times when I show up to an event and everybody's drinking because they're just trying to loosen up, right? Hey, just loosen up. I'm just going to have a drink. I'm just going to loosen up. And that's great. I mean, that's fine. Listen, if you can handle your drinking and you're not one of the 1 in 8 that can't, then that's fine. I'm not inherently saying that smoking weed is bad for you or drinking is bad for you. I mean, heroin's bad for you. Meth is bad for you. There's plenty of drugs that are bad for you, but drinking and smoking a little weed in a safe environment isn't necessarily a bad thing. The problem is when you are doing it to a point where it's abusive and it's harmful to you. So I completely get it. It's like, if you just want to loosen up and go out and have some beers to blow off some steam, connect with your friends, totally cool. But if you're that person who then goes home afterwards and gets blackout drunk alone, you got a problem. You got a problem, man. I'm sorry to break it to you, but listen, it could get fixed. It can. People fix this stuff all the time. It's so funny when you look at these alcohol and recovery programs and everything is like, oh, pity party. And it's, dude, there is a lot of heavy emotional lifting that you have to do in order to deal with any inherent anxiety or stress or trauma. I've been there. I lost my mom tragically, and that put me in a downward spiral that was really hard for me to pull out of. So I know I've cried plenty of times, and I still cry with men in my program because I have developed an emotional intelligence that I didn't realize was something that I was missing before. You know, a level of empathy, not only towards others, but also towards myself and the person that I was and how I want to be. So if you are abusing these things, that's a problem. But if you're just doing it because you're a social person and you enjoy social drinking and you can drive home sober, you're not putting yourself or anybody else at risk. You're not putting your family's future at stake. You're not coming home drunk when your kids might need you to drive them to the hospital if they fall and they get stitched, they need stitches. That's cool. There's a lot of people that can handle being a grown-up and drinking responsibly, and more power to them. To those people, I would say, have you tried not drinking and just getting exercise with some of those friends, maybe going on a jog with them? Because we know that the endorphins that happen when you're going on a walk, even with somebody just hiking, are just as powerful than having a few drinks. And there's other ways that are healthy to burn out stress and have that social connection without drinking. But inherently, there's nothing wrong with drinking. It's the abuse and the potential downward spiral that can happen if you aren't doing it in a way that's positive for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think, one of the things I just noticed for myself, and I hear a lot from my clients or friends, is that when I, like every January, I do dry January just to reset from like a lot more drinking. And I don't normally drink a whole lot in general, not even every weekend, maybe every other weekend, maybe if that, maybe less. But I know around the holidays, it tends to increase. And I notice within myself that I start to have like cravings for it. And I think it goes with any type of substance. It's like sugar, coffee, like anything. If you feel like you're craving it, that means like addiction is starting to bubble up to some extent. And I don't like when that happens, because normally, having a drink or two every other weekend is no big deal, really. I can handle it. But when like those cravings start to like set in and I feel like I want to drink during the weekdays and all the time, a lot more, then I'm like, oh, wait, I got to take a step back. This isn't how I want to live my life, because I got to get a lot of things done. And yeah, so like January kind of resets me to and not have any cravings anymore. So I don't feel like the desire for it. But I think it's a subtle build for a lot of people that they're not necessarily aware of, that I think is important to notice.
I agree. Addiction is very insidious. It sneaks up on you and then it hurts you. And I'm the same way around the holidays. I love cake and pie and all the sweet, man. And all my aunts make these amazing baked goods. And now my brother makes my mom's old recipes of all these great traditional Italian cookies called pizzeles that I love. And he makes my mom's old chocolate chip cookie recipe. So there's, and I'm not, and listen, I don't eat a lot of sugar. But when my brother, somebody that I love and respect, gives me a cookie that was handwritten from a recipe that my mom wrote, that's going to take me back to my childhood, I'll be damned if I'm going to put that cookie down. I'm going to eat it, right?
Yeah.
But to your point, all of a sudden it's January and I'm like, man, I want sugar in the middle of the day, you know, all of these, because my diet's been thrown off. And it doesn't take long for a habit to start falling in, right? You get into these patterns. So what I love about dry January is it gives people a chance to really just reset.
Yeah.
And it also gives a lot of people a wake up call of being like, dang, I didn't realize I was drinking so much. Because some people, they especially now with COVID and everybody working from home, and I work in the tech industry and we're spread out all over the country, globally, in fact, the team that I work with. So you're talking to a guy in London, like this morning, I was on a call with a guy in London. It was evening time for him and he was pouring himself a pint. And it's like, good on you, man. Like, have that pint. You've had a long day. You guys are on lockdown. You can't even go to the grocery store. You know, that's hard. But then all of a sudden it's 3:30 on a Tuesday and somebody's sort of calling that out, being like, oh man, I'm just, I'm going to pour myself a couple fingers of bourbon. Have you guys tried this one? And now the discussion is validating their position that they need to drink during an inappropriate work time. And also it's very inconsiderate and insensitive to people that have an issue that they really need to not be around these kind of triggers. I'm over it. It's no big thing for me. My wife enjoys wine a couple times a week and that's great for her. So I don't have any problem with it. I could pour her a glass of wine. I could smell the wine. I give her that without it triggering me. But a lot of people that are maybe either really early in their recovery or they've been sober for a long time, but they're going through a really rocky period, those kinds of triggers can put them over the edge. So I think we need to be more sensitive in corporate America around like how we glorify drinking, because they never know what's going to be harmful for people and very triggering for people. And to take it a step further, alcoholics are actually part of covered under like the Americans with Disabilities Act. So if you have people that are within your organization that have to go to rehab or have a drinking problem at work, it's not like you can just fire these people because Joe's a drunk. No, they're a protected class, and you have to be sensitive of that. And if you're curious about that, you should talk to your HR person. And if your HR person doesn't realize that's a thing, they need to do a little bit of research on that. So we, as a culture in corporate America, we need to be more mindful of the way we glorify alcohol, the way that we promote it at all of our events, and the way that we talk about it within our culture of just our companies. Because there's also a lot of young people that are very influential. And when I was younger, I was trying to do whatever it took to grow my career. And I would see my bosses and my executives talking about bourbon, and somebody closes a big deal and then they get a big bottle of bourbon as a gift, right, from the sales executives. And I was like, cool, that's what it is. I can have a shot of bourbon at lunchtime with my boss because this is how it goes. And honestly, it shouldn't be how it is. You want to reward people for their efforts, but you never know what's going to send somebody down a wrong path. And it's just one of those cultures I think is slowly changing. There's a lot more awareness around these issues these days. There's a lot of people that are choosing not to drink, not because they're scared that they're an alcoholic, but because they realize that they can perform better as individuals without these things. So I think we're going to see less and less of that, but it's still very prominent in corporate America these days. And so one of the missions that I'm on is to help reduce that stigma, be open about my sobriety, because I want the little Joe Booths and the little Alice Fongs and the little Donovans that are out there to realize that you don't have to grow up drinking just because you've got this desk job, that it's okay to not do this stuff. And nobody was saying that when I was younger. And if they were, I didn't hear about them. I didn't see these people. They probably were out there, but I didn't see any of them. So I want a role model for more people so they realize that there doesn't have to be this stigma. I don't have to go to a church basement every day during my lunch hour and pray to a higher power to help me get through another day because I have an incurable disease. You can get over it. It is something that people get over every single day. You just need the right tools. You need the right people, and you need to learn how to use those tools appropriately in the right situations. And then it becomes a new habit system, a new mindset. And it's all just about repetition. It's all about practice. Eventually you build all these new neural pathways that form the identity and the thoughts and the habits that we create around ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's really important to, like you were saying, get the message out, because maybe to a lesser degree, that mirrors my path to some degree in terms of, hey, I'm feeling stressed. I'm 20 something. Okay, I'm going to start drinking. Okay, this seems to actually work pretty well. And also, I don't know what else to do. And had I been exposed to this sort of information earlier and knowing that these other things work, as well as, having a little bit more information on just kind of how things build, like we were talking about before. Like at first it was pretty low key thing. And then I saw myself at one point where I was like, wow, I drink to deal with any problem I have. And this is crazy. Yeah. That's not going to work long-term. I wanted to touch on one other thing. This is a slight switch of topic, but going back a little bit when we were talking about dry January, or just generally the idea of taking a month off of drinking, I think is a really useful tool for anyone, regardless of if they feel like they have a problem or not, because that was what allowed me to get a very clear grasp on what my relationship was. Because before I did that, one of those times, I was like, yeah, kind of seems a little bit like a lot, but it's fine. And then once I had a full month of, I'm not doing this, I was still performing 100%. I was still getting my stuff paid, going to work, et cetera, et cetera. But I started seeing all these things like, wow, I have a strong urge to drink every single day after work. Wow, I have a strong urge to drink a lot on the weekends. Wow, whenever I go out with my friends. Wow, all the time these things were popping up. And I don't think I would have noticed it, or at least it would have had to become more serious of a problem had I not taken a month to go, okay, what is my relationship with this? What's going on here? And what is my life like without it? And it was roughly the same, like you were saying, it didn't magically give me tools to solve some of the stressors that I had. But I also realized that, drinking wasn't solving any of the problems either. It was potentially sometimes giving me a little bit of a respite. And then I would wake up hungover with a different problem and different feelings and all the other problems that I had before. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that piece because I think some people listening may or may not know where they are on the spectrum. And for me, that was super helpful.
I love that you bring this up because what dry January does is it's a mindfulness practice, right? It gives people a chance to reflect. And that's what mindfulness is all about. And at Class 5 Mind, we say you have to turn mindfulness into action. It's not just good enough to be mindful. I mean, we have a whole diet program with Class 5 Mind where we teach people the right foods to eat for brain health. And guess what? Everybody already knows it. They're like, oh, this isn't new information, Joe. What are you doing? And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm not here to tell you, I am here to share information with you. Some of it you're going to learn that's new. The brain science for sure. Nobody knows the brain science, but the food is anybody could Google this stuff, right? The crux isn't knowing it. It's putting it into action. So what you have to be able to do is systematically make changes. And that's what's so difficult for people to do. The brain has two primary purposes. One is to conserve energy. It does not want to change because change takes effort. And two is to stay alive. So the only time it's going to use energy is if it needs to modify its behavior so it can continue to survive. So until somebody is at a point in their life where they realize that they need to make a big change, they need to survive in this situation, then and only then are people's brains willing to be open in order to make that change and to put that effort out. Then they start eating right. Then they start trying to change their bedtime. But it's still really hard to do alone. That's why you have to work with some peers or a coach or whatever, a therapist or a doctor, whomever you trust to do these things. It's not just the knowledge. You have to change the environment. You have to systematically put things into place. And it's there, and that's where the awareness lacks, because people don't realize how to change. They just think, hey, one day I'm going to wake up, I'm going to quit cold turkey, life's going to fall into place. And then eventually the brain pulls them back to those old patterns because the brain wants to stay in that state of homeostasis. Hey, everything was fine, man. The brain thinks it's all good. Meanwhile, you might not realize things are slowly eroding around you. And then dry January comes along and you're like, dang, I saved over $2,000 this month because I didn't go to the bars every night. That $2,000 a month, that's a lot of money. But really, if you live in San Francisco and you're spending $200 on a Friday night, on a Saturday night, I mean, that stuff adds up really quick, right? Really quick.
Wow. Yeah, that's another reason to cut back on drinking because of the expense. Oh man, that's a huge amount. For sure. Yeah, Joe, we really appreciate having you on our show and sharing so much useful insight and helping people beat substance abuse. Was there anything you would like to plug before we wrap up today?
Check out class5mind.com. And if it resonates with you, please, let's schedule a time to talk. There's no reason why anybody should struggle through this kind of thing alone. You can change, and it's not just you that you're going to change. You're going to change your life and the people that are in your life. And you might also make a big difference and be a role model for somebody else in the future too. And we have this effect that's so much broader than we realize. And it's an amazing thing to be a part of, is that upward spiral that helps people. And if there's anybody that's into adventure sports like whitewater kayaking or snowboarding, I talk a lot about my snowboarding adventures in my book. I worked in the snowboard industry for 10 years as well and had a lot of good times then. Check out From the River, my book. You can find it on Amazon. And I think you'll find a lot of the stories and analogies in there around what it's like to be a young man trying to figure out the world and trying to deal with the emotional stressors that come with being in life challenging and risking situations. So if you're into that stuff, I hope you find some comfort in what we're trying to do. And even if it's not Class 5 Mind that you look into, find something. There's a lot of great programs. There's a lot of great people out there that are willing to help you. People change all the time, and you can change too. And you can be proud of the person that you're becoming. And if you already are super stoked on where you're at in life, then more power to you, man. Pass it on, put it on to somebody else, put it forward. We all have this great opportunity to make the world a better place. Let's not waste that chance.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing. And I know absolutely when it comes to overcoming substance abuse, getting support and having structures, taking actions is absolutely necessary to do so. And you have a community, so it would be also surrounding them with a community to support them in addition to you. So yes, check out Class 5 Mind. And thank you for being a part of our show. And thank you everyone for watching. And we'll see you next time.
You can check out more content at howtohappy.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date on the videos. We've also got a Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook that you can check out. Reflect, take action, and enjoy life. See you next time.